Hi, this is a foreigner in the Philippines. Well, it's late at night again, so time for me to do one of my late night meanderings and try and louder my voice a little because I'm realizing that it is probably down in my boots. Um, anyway, it's 10 after 11 here, and I'm just wondering what kind of meanderings I should be doing. Well, I seem to remember that the last time that I spoke, we were talking about war years and stuff like that, and St Wilfred's school. St Wilfred's was a little secondary modern school, Catholic school, in what was called Hume. Well, we used to call it Oom, but it's Hulme. But with a slang Manchester accent, you call it, oh, I live in Oom. Oom. Anyway, it was Hume, of course. Well, St Wilfred's was an experience of its own. I never forget that. It had a headmaster. The original headmaster that I remember was Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle was a terrifying figure. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall, and he had glasses which one of the eyes was blanked out. I never understood why, and I never questioned it because, well, I wasn't old enough to question things like that. And if you remember, the last time I talked about St Wilfred's, it was about the board duster that was hurled at me and hit me on the forehead. Well, looking around that and looking over it, we used to go every Thursday we'd go into this little chapel. Well, it wasn't a little chapel to me because I was only a kid, and it was a huge school to me, a huge church I should say, and it was attached to the school. And St Wilfred's School was for boys on one side and for girls on the other, and there was a fence in between which the boys could look at the girls through. Well, anyway, at that particular time, we weren't really very interested in girls, were we? I mean, they were strange things, and quite mysterious as well. I mean, I had a girl for a sister, so what was I interested in? Very, very weird it was to me. That changed, of course, as it does. But anyway, Mr. Doyle and his 6'7" was, if we were sent to Mr. Doyle, we went into this, well, first of all, we waited outside in terror, and when we finally went in, Mr. Doyle spoke with a very strange way of speaking that seemed to have his lips were, part stitched together. So he was a very, very scary man, and yet I realise now that he probably was very fond of his kids. He was later replaced by a Mr. Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham, I think I told you, was an extremely handsome, seemingly, looking back, an accomplished man, a headmaster, and he spoke awfully well. And I remember him telling all of the class a joke, and yes, it's probably as funny now as it was then, and it wasn't funny then. But I'll tell you it anyway because it illustrates what a nerd we all thought he was. And he says, of course, I'm trying to explain to you boys how silly it is to swear. He said, I mean, for instance, he said, if you're about to describe how you look and you are frightened, he said, some people are really quite stupid. They say, he was as white as a bloody sheet. Well, of course, and then he explained the joke. How, of course, can you be as white as a bloody sheet? Because if it's a bloody sheet, it wouldn't be white, would it? No, Mr. Cunningham, it wouldn't be white if it was a bloody sheet. And as I said, it wasn't funny then either. Well, Mr. Cunningham retained his title there, and I left while Mr. Cunningham was in charge. I remember leaving at 15, and my first job was in a tailoring place. We used to make raincoats and some various garments, and I actually liked working on. I wanted to learn how to be a tailor. A machinist. I really thought that was quite interesting. I remember they tried me on packing, which I did okay because it doesn't require a great deal of intelligence to learn how to fold brown paper around cardboard boxes. But then I indicated that I wouldn't mind learning how to use a machine, and the machine they put me on first was what they call a bar tack machine, and that's the one that does those little stitches that stop a buttonhole from going any further. So I was on the buttonhole machine, and then I bar tacked the buttonhole. Well, that went very well until one day I folded a raincoat the wrong way when I put it through the bar tack machine, and I bar tacked it through about 3 or 4 different levels of the thing, which looked quite awkward when it was put on by anybody. I didn't say anything because I was 15, and my mother had taught me never tell the truth if you can get away with it. So I never said anything, and then somebody came up to me and said, "Excuse me, son, is this one of your jobs?" "Oh, is it? Yes, I think it is, yes." "Well, did you not think that anybody would notice it?" "Well, no." "Well, it was noticed, and we're taking you off the bar tack machine, okay? You've done your last bar tack." Okay, so it was back to folding brown paper around cardboard boxes. Well, then I got a real job, which was in the coal mines, and I went to the Robin Hood pit, where I was issued with a miner's helmet and well, you didn't get the light, although I would love to have had the light, which you put on your head, and every time you turn your head you can see where you're going in the dark. I thought that was wonderful. Well, I also got a pair of steel-capped boots, which I thought was wonderful too, because I never had a pair of boots. Well, we had to wait then until there were enough young men to form a training group, and we used to do odd jobs around the pit, just fiddling about really. And anyway, finally we got a group together and we started going down the pit. And I remember my first time going down the pit, I thought it was a great thrill. But you didn't go into these fancy things that you see in American movies where they get in there and it's made for that, for taking men down the pit, 1,000 foot or whatever it is. No, it's not like that at all. You go into what's made for the tubs. It's made to take 2 tubs. Tubs is those things that they put the coal in to bring them up from the coal face. Well, we went into that, all of us, with our hearts in our mouths, and we were lowered down the pit. And it's an eerie feeling because there's water dripping, going pa-ting, pa-ting. And you're watching the sides of the pit, which they don't take very good care of the sides of the pit, and I don't suppose they ever get a coat of paint. And it is quite scary. Well, you get down to the bottom of the pit and it's very untidy down there. What you're being trained for is to be on haulage, and they take you down and they put you through different experiences which will prepare you for that magnificent job of getting coal from the coal face. Well, as you walk along, you realize that this is not a terribly safe place, because you can see the pit props, which are made of metal in the main tunnel, and they're bent, which means that the earth, of which there are too many countless tons above you, is settling and it's squeezing these pit props. And you think, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Well, we used to do several days down the pit every week, and then we'd do a couple of days at the college where we would learn how everything was done, about the updraft and the downdraft and the open cast, and how it's not possible for the cage to drop down because it had a fail safe on it, and all of that. And of course then there were the other things where we experienced actually they would take you into a disused part of the pit which had everything there. It had the little rail tracks which these tubs used to go on, and it would have a turning place which you could practice on, and you could practice turning these things and putting them back on the track and sending them back up again, and you could practice coupling them together and all of that. And then what they used to do was they used to turn all of the lights off, and you would sit there, and for the first time in your life probably you would experience total darkness. That's when you can press almost a finger on your eye and not see anything at all. And of course we would all take our snap down there, and snap is the word for your food that you're going to take down. And you take little bits of, well in my case little bits of paper which you put around your sandwich so that you didn't eat a bit of coal dust, and you'd sit in the dust and you'd all have your lunch. You'd take a bottle of water down there, and you'd have your sandwiches, and it was a thrill a minute, I can tell you. Well, we'd all sit around, and then we'd talk about the various, and there's always somebody who knows everything. Have you noticed that? There's always somebody who knows everything about the pit. Well, you know that they've lost people down here, and there was a big accident in 1904 to death. And they tell you about it, and how men were trapped down there. And the only way that they knew that they were alive would be that they would get their hammer, or whatever tool it was, and they would tap on a pipe. And the people on the other side, on the good side of the fall of coal or whatever had collapsed, would hear this tapping, and they would know that the men were still alive. I'm not trivializing this, by the way. We were really scared when we were talking about this, because we're looking around this disused shaft that we're in there, and it didn't look so safe. And the more we talked, the more unsafe it looked. Well, that was one of the experiences that we looked at. And then we were taken as part of our training to another pit, which was a much more modern pit. The Robin Hood pit where I was trained was, I guess, an older pit. It wasn't as well equipped, but we were taken to another pit in, I think, Worsley. It's all a long, long time ago now, by the way. We were taken there, and there they had huge shafts, main tunnels that took the coal miners out to their various places along this great network of coal. And there they would be underneath into very smaller shafts where the coal was taken. And at that time they were still using wooden pit props. We were cautioned against wooden pit props because they could be hammered into a place that was there to hold up the shaft, and if there was any settlement it would bear down on the wooden pit prop, and they could be fired like bullets, just by the pressure finally giving way, and it would ping the pit prop, and of course men were killed. And I thought then, I looked at these men who were being taken by these motorized carts along these main thoroughfares down 1,000 feet below, or whatever it was, and I would think then that they were special men. And then you got so black with coal that you would never ever be able quite to get the coal away from inside the eyes, and you could always tell a coal miner in those days because it looked like he had mascara on his eyes, and I always thought of that as the mascara of the pit. Now, my friend Eric went on to become a coal miner, and I used to write to him for a while, and we kept in touch. Of course, as you may know from earlier videos, as I was about to start work at the Bradford pit, which I think is somebody in that area wrote to me recently after they'd heard that story, and they said, yeah, the Bradford pit is closed now. And I was due to start work there on haulage at 15.5. Lucky for me, I went into the army. Oh, wait a minute, was it lucky for me? I'm not quite sure about that. I could have left the pit. Anyway, I went into the army, and so the army was my life for 8.5 years after that.
I'm going to sleep now.
Who's this? What's happening, honey?
Yeah, I'm going to sleep. Can you close the laptop when you come, if you go upstairs? Can you close the laptop, okay?
Who is that person? Who's there? It's 20. So, are you telling me that I have to wait until it's done?
It's just a few, and then close the laptop because Golden will sleep there.
Golden will sleep on the laptop.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, there she is. So, what I was about to tell you before I was so rudely interrupted was that years and years later, because we were talking, weren't we, about St Wilfred's, I decided that I would try to go back and find the school. Sadly, it had been demolished along with a lot of other parts of Manchester, but as I was cycling along, I took my bike on the train from London up to Manchester, and then I cycled around trying to find some old memories. Tried to find Tamworth Street. 20 Tamworth Street didn't exist anymore. Wellington Grove. I lived in a tiny little house, terraced house in Tamworth, Wellington Grove, and that had gone to, along with Stretford Road, along with Tamworth Street, and along with the sweet shop that I saw the final let go of sweet rationing after the war. And I tried to find St Wilfred School. Well, I rode around and around and around. None of the streets made any sense to me because they were all new, and so none of the directions. North is meaningless. North, south, east, west, they're all meaningless for the streets that are the new streets that are there. But finally I did find the church, and it was as if it had been dropped, as if in a dream, into this totally new place, totally new streets. But there was this little miniature replica of the huge church that I used to go to when I was at St Wilfred's. And this is one of the shocks when you go back to somewhere where you were a little kid in, is that everything's scaled up, isn't it? So the enormous house that I would have been able to find if it was still there would have been quite a small house. And the church that I knocked on the priest's house, which was in a little courtyard, and a novice came to the door, and she she wanted to know. Obviously, I said, well, I used to go to St Wilfred's when I was a kid, and I would just love to just look inside the church if that's possible. And she was very nice, and she opened the church, They don't. In my day, they never locked the church because nobody would ever dream of doing a mischief inside the church. They would just go in and pray. But of course, that's not the case anymore. People don't do that. They go in and do vandalism if they get the chance. Anyway, I went inside this tiny place, and it was a shock to me because when I saw how small everything was, I realized that Mr. Doyle was probably only 5'6". It was only because I was tiny that I thought he was 6'7" or whatever he was. So our childhood, we have lots of surprises, don't we? And that's my meandering, I beg your pardon, for this evening. If you've been listening and you're about to go to bed, I hope that my talking about Mr. Doyle won't give you nightmares. He was actually a very nice man. So, this is A Foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now.